If Oregon wants a top 5 class in 2025, yeah, they might need Trey McNutt.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. It's Friday. Brian Smith is here, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Brian, let's start with Trey McNutt and what he means for Oregon's class. He's committing Friday, July 19th, which is why I'm releasing this show a little bit earlier than normal at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be on his Instagram page. We'll talk about what kind of player he is in just a moment, but after DJ Pickett, who we'll also talk about on today's show, went to LSU, feels like for Oregon to keep that top 5 recruiting class status, Trey McNutt's a guy they really need to land.
Yeah, you need as many 4- and 5-star players as you can get, but this is a kid, not only do you get him, some of the other schools that you're in contention with for top 5 would not. So it's one way that's really positive, and another, hey, you don't have to play against him too. So he's an elite player, and I think he could play just about anywhere in the secondary. And Oregon getting a kid like this, again, they're so random with recruiting. It really is fascinating.
Yeah, he's from the state of Ohio, and, you know, he's a top 2 or 3 safety by every recruiting service metric in the class. That's a position that Oregon can certainly use some bodies at because they're going to lose several after this year. They do have a couple in the room, guys like Aaron Flowers and Peyton Woodyard, but as you start to, you know, project out and look at a depth chart for the safeties in 2025, I mean, it's a name that could certainly pop up right there. But have you heard anything lately about Trey McNutt and where he might be leaning? There have been predictions from On3's Steve Wiltfong, who also had predictions for DJ Pickett to go to Oregon, and that, of course, did not end up taking place. But he said he feels 70% confident that Oregon is going to land Trey McNutt here. Do you agree?
That's the scuttlebutt that he's going to get himself out to Oregon. But just a warning to everybody, in today's realm of recruiting with NIL and everything, this can change in 12 seconds. I know Steve well from working with him. He doesn't miss much. These aren't going to be things that he can control. Like DJ in particular wasn't telling anybody anything. And I warned everybody about that. But Trey, I don't think is quite like DJ for one. DJ's a complete introvert. Everybody seems to think he's going to Oregon. This is a different kind of dynamic. I mean, you got to be really confident for a kid from Ohio to pick Oregon. But everybody is. What's that tell you? So I think he's going to be a Duck.
Well, that's certainly what Oregon fans would like to hear, but it's certainly what we were all hearing when DJ Pickett was getting set to commit. Like all the buzz, I mean, Max Torres and Steve Wiltfong, and they all had, you know, and others had predictions for him to wind up a Duck, and then it just didn't happen. And what Justin Hopkins of On3 reported was, or of Scoop Duck rather, he said that there was a late push for DJ Pickett from LSU. That, of course, worked out. They get the verbal commitment. 2 questions on that, and the first one is, help my audience understand, what does a late push mean? What does it look like?
I don't know how much I really want to get into this, but I'm sure that's money, for one. Let's not kid ourselves. 2, it's just effort. Relationships still win the day. Corey Raymond is the one that won the day. Corey's a guy I know. He was at LSU for a long time, went to Florida. Now he's back at LSU. He had a great relationship with DJ. If he didn't, and especially the way, did you see LSU's defense last year? Why would anybody be excited?
Wasn't good. Wasn't good. Well, that's why they hired a new defensive staff.
Well, that's true. But here's the other part of it. DJ, and I've known him since 8th grade, he knows that he's really good. He's going to go somewhere he's comfortable because he thinks he's going to be dominant wherever he goes. He's probably right. So he just went with comfort because I'm sure that all 3 of Miami, Oregon, and LSU offered a lot of money. he's going to be rich the rest of his life anyway. He went with comfort.
The other question was about something you told me earlier this week, that you felt that whoever DJ Pickett chooses, his recruitment, unlike a guy like DeCorian Moore or Dallas Wilson who are committed to the Ducks, you don't feel like his recruitment is completely shut down. Do you still feel that way after watching everything play out?
I don't think that's going to change until he signs, for two reasons. Number one, I know that Miami is frustrated, for one. That's not maybe. They are. They thought.
I had Miami fans in my mention saying, "Hey, let's have a group morning session together." And I was like, we really wanted this guy. Good player.
He is not only a great player, he's from the state of Florida. His cousin just signed with Miami. Their biggest need in this class is corner, and he's the rarest corner you're ever going to see. Like, they couldn't have had a more inside straight on what they needed, and it's there in their own state. That's rough. So I understand the group morning thing, but that being stated, Mario Cristobal in particular could care less about commit. If you went back and counted up how many guys he's flipped in the last 5 years, he's really good at it. So yeah, I highly doubt it's over. Let's see if DJ takes a visit to Oregon or to Georgia or whatever during the season. That's, you know, as I always say, it's not what a kid comes out of his mouth. It's where he goes for visits. Follow that.
Speaking of visits and, you know, what kids do rather than what they say, I had a question come in about a name that Oregon fans probably haven't heard of just yet. Chris Henry, big-time wide receiver prospect in the class of 2026, not 2025. He's currently an Ohio State commit, but he is visiting Oregon in July. Now, the other name that Oregon has been tied to before, and Auburn's reportedly the other team in the fold, is Naeem Offord, who is also an Ohio State commit. But there was a piece in the SI page covering the Buckeyes earlier this week, Brian, that Offord might decommit, and that certainly catches my attention. It's one thing when other fan bases say, you know, it's one thing if Auburn Daily writes, yeah, no, he's gonna decommit, or if somebody who covers Oregon is saying, oh yeah, Oregon could totally flip this guy. But when an Ohio State site comes out and writes a piece that says this guy might decommit, boy, that leads me to believe he knows something about Offord's plans. So I'll just, with these two guys, what chance do you give Oregon of getting a flip from Ohio State on just one of them?
I would go Offord would be the more likely to not come. I know Chris better than I know Naeem, but here's the thing. If you're a wide receiver, it's hard to turn down Ohio State. Chris is from Cincinnati, like his dad's Chris Henry Jr. or Chris Henry. He's Chris Henry Jr. He lived in Ohio. I mean, he's moved out to California to play at Mater Dei, but that's going to be rough. Offord, on the other hand, is an Alabama kid committed to Ohio State. And that's different. And he's a kid that visited Oregon already. He's got, like, Auburn is all over him, and I'm sure the rest of the free world is as well. That's a unique situation. Him and Pickett might be the two best DBs in the country. Yeah. Do you think anybody really cares that he's committed to Ohio State, especially with him not being an in-state kid, not from the North? Oregon, what is it? You know, they get an Alabama kid every year. Why not this kid? So they need corners. Why not?
Yeah, if he decommits from Ohio State, I think that'll make a lot of ripples in Oregon circles because, you know, reportedly it'll be, I mean, I'm sure, as you said, the entire free world and Western Hemisphere is going to go and try to get him to commit to their school. And, yeah, why wouldn't you with a guy as talented as he is? But it'd be an Oregon and Auburn conversation primarily. But then again, DJ Pickett was seen widely as Miami and Oregon. It's Miami, it's Oregon, it's LSU. That's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. We still have plenty more of a cookie to digest with Brian here on the show, including film breakdown of Oregon's latest offensive line commitment. Brian's going to make it work. What am I talking about? Well, we'll talk about it next. First, we're talking about Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Whatever you're looking for, you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. You download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Brian, let's start with some film breakdown before we talk about a couple other names in the 2025 cycle that Oregon is after. Alai Kalaniuvalu, four-star offensive lineman from Bishop Gorman High School, one of the two real powerhouse high schools for recruiting in the Las Vegas area, along with Liberty. I know there are a couple other good ones, but those are the ones that I've become the most familiar with. And this is a guy who I think can be Oregon's starting center one day. He has those sorts of traits. He began his career in Utah. He then went down to Bishop Gorman, and that's where he's going to play his senior year. He's played tackle. He's played interior. The 24/7 scouting report is that he projects as a center when he gets to college. Do you agree?
I think that's his best asset, is being able to snap at his height, 6'3.5", something like that in height. It would be smart. He can play guard for sure. But snapping also carries another responsibility, and that's the line calls. As a general rule, it's the center. Playing at that program will help him. Their O-line coaching at Bishop Gorman is tremendous. They got 3 kids. They're Power 5 on the O-line. Yeah.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
Good luck to the other schools in the local area playing Bishop Gorman. Not going to be pretty. With that being stated, he pulls well. He's a powerful guy. He's going to walk in at give or take 300 pounds. He could play as like a second-year guy. He's really, really ahead of the curve.
He doesn't put a ton of film on film, which I find to be curious for a guy who's as talented as he is. I do wonder if the weight gain's a part of it, because he was listed, if you look at his 24/7 profile, he's once upon a time 6'3", 275. Now he's listed 6'4", 300. I mean, that's 25 pounds that he's added, so maybe he wants to show what he looks like at the new weight, and that's only from this past season. Maybe he'll have more at the end of the year. I don't know. It struck me as odd that a guy as capable as he is didn't have a bevy of highlights on there, but are some kids just kind of like that sometimes and you don't always get an explanation?
Well, the kid that ended up signing with Nebraska, the quarterback that was committed to Ohio State, then Georgia, ended up with Nebraska, the number 1 player, by the way.
Dylan Raiola.
He didn't have any junior film. He put up none.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
So
he's really good, by the way.
Yeah, he does not suck. The point is very simple. Some kids just do what they do, much to my dismay. I even had a Georgia writer tell me, "Have you seen any? We don't have any film of this Raiola kid." I'm like, nobody does. They were all mad because they all wanted to do a film breakdown for their sites. Well, you're not going to be doing any. So that's just the way it is. It's rare, and it's becoming more and more rare because, heck, if nothing else, you can find some fan, oftentimes a parent, that's posted something on YouTube. It's hilarious, but it's better than nothing, too.
So one question that a couple of Oregon fans asked me about Alai, as we'll refer to him, Kalaniuvalu, I think is how you pronounce his last name, based on how it is spelled. But I haven't been able to confirm this, but I believe he's a Utah native. He's planning to take a 2-year mission after his senior season, which frankly works out with Oregon because Poncho's going to be Oregon's starting center this year, and he is going to be a true junior next year, so he'll be Oregon's starting center again in all likelihood. And then they could find a portal guy for 26, and then by the time Alai gets on campus, he's probably ready to be Oregon's starting center, or at least compete for that position. But for offensive linemen, we talked about this with Gatlin Bear, 5-star wideout in this 2024 class who won't show up till 26 for the Ducks. What do you make of guys that take 2 years away from football when you're at a position where your body type and your size matter so much?
Here's the thing. I always wondered about it too, but I mean, you live out there. Who always does it and has success? It's BYU. So I don't know exactly.
Yeah, they've brought in guys over the years.
Yeah, I mean, their O-lines are usually pretty good. Now, part of it's just experience. I'd rather have a 23-year-old in front of me than a 19 or 20-year-old. Okay, if I'm waiting on some large man to run into me, I want the experienced guy. But they even redshirt some of their kids too when they get back because they've lost a lot of muscle. They don't get to do the strength training you need to do as an O-lineman, especially the Olympic training. There's no way to do it when you're on a mission. So every kid's a little different. I'm sure some of them cheat a little bit on what they're supposed to be doing on the mission. There's no way that, either you're benching 380 or you're not. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way around it. It's the second year. And some of these guys don't graduate until they're like 25 years old when they're at BYU. So if you do it constantly, it really works out because they're not rushed. The guys that come in after a mission play year one as O-line, yeah, they were cheating.
All right. Good. I'm here for it. Like, I think what excited me most about what you just said is I'd rather have a 21-year-old than a 19-year-old. Like, yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. Like, your body can continue to grow and mature. Some guys are really, really late bloomers on that front, but love the insight there. Let's go back to 2025 names here. Couple of guys whose commitments are upcoming or we don't quite know, or at least I do not quite know. Let's start with Juan Gaston Jr., speaking of offensive linemen.
Massive.
August 2nd commitment, massive. Oregon is clearly going after these big kids. You talk about Shaq McCroy, and Gaston is a guy that they're after, which makes me think of a Disney song, but that's a different conversation. August 2nd, yeah, Brian's just shaking his head, just, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to do a show with this kid, but such is life. August 2nd is when he commits. Oregon's expected to be one of the final schools. Who else is in the fold? And do you think Oregon is a peripheral school in this race or one of the leaders?
Until otherwise proven, he's going to Georgia. That's just the way I look at it because they prioritize him since his sophomore year. And they don't miss on many kids from Atlanta. That being the case, Tennessee's been a school that's kicked around for a long time. And then Oregon is always the fly in the ointment. I'm not sure if it's because you're a fan and that's the problem, but Oregon's just the oddball school that they've won a bunch of battles here in the last month. So I won't count them out. But again, Georgia doesn't miss very often on the O-line. The only caveat here, and maybe Juan will or will not consider this, last year's Georgia class had 6 O-linemen. Smallest was like 320, 330. So, yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't know if he wants to join that because it's going to be harder to play there. They just had one of the great O-line hauls you're going to see. We'll see if that makes a difference when he announces.
So the size of Georgia's offensive linemen, I saw the lineup of guys they already had and just went, oh, man, that's crazy. And then I thought about it for a sec, like, wait a minute, Oregon's coach came from Georgia, and they got Shaq McCroy, and they're going after guys like this.
They're trying to mimic Georgia as much as they can. That's not the case for us.
Yeah. And I just thought about, it's kind of different because this is not the sort of body type. Like, he projects as a tackle, right?
Yeah, Juan will probably play right if I had to guess. But somebody between him and Shaq, somebody got to play left. That's the question. The other thing, Juan is going to need to change his body some. He's got some bad weight, and Georgia's program for it is they run 7 days a week. It's insane. No other program is like theirs in the offseason. It's very odd, but he'll be 315 after a year. They want him big and bring him down. They're the only program that does it like they do. It's very unusual.
Well, it just kind of all clicked in my head. Like, why is yeah, that's right. That's who Dan learned it from. It turns out coaching influences are indeed a very, very real thing. Another 5-star name in the 2025 class that Oregon's been after, Michael Terry III. Do you have a commitment date or a timeline for him yet, or is he still kind of floating around, just enjoying life and not letting people know you don't know when I'm committing? Too bad, man.
He's a kid that can do whatever he wants. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a kid that ends up just announcing and Hayes Fawcett or somebody puts up he's a kid that just seems to
like we just wake up one day on August 4th and no one knows anything. You're like, oh, hey, look, he did. It's the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. Like, right.
That's right. There's a couple of kids a year do stuff like that. He's a kid that could have a big announcement. I didn't expect DJ to have one as big as he did because he's a real quiet kid. His mom might have wanted that or something because DJ is not that guy. So it just depends. But his recruitment is wild. Like Nebraska is in it. I mean, no offense, Nebraska stinks. So I'm surprised that they're in the
Nebraska might be good this year for what it's worth. I think they're a 7-8 win team.
We'll come back to that later.
Oh, good is okay. Oh yeah, we will. That's Oregon's Big Ten brethren, Nebraska, to you.
Okay. Yeah, well, no wonder Oregon joined the league for an easy win. The point is this. A&M and Texas and Oregon, okay, then you got Nebraska. But Oregon's still it's weird. You got the school out west. It's so hard to figure out, and he doesn't give a lot of good info. I have given up on trying to get because he's an unbelievable player. Like, I don't care what position he'd want to play. I'd want him on my football team. But, you know, I would say he won't leave the state. That's kind of the history with kids like this. But again, Oregon is the fly in the ointment. They've already hit on some of these. Have they used up all their chips in the casino, or do they have another one left? I mean, they get this kid. I don't even know where they're going to use him. Running back, defensive end. I don't know. It's just whatever. He's a great football player.
I'm trying to think about where Oregon. I think it depends on how the class shakes out, who returns from this year's team that has the option to come back, but might go to the NFL because, you know, you got to play a guy that can play 3 to 4 different spots. Oregon might not know. They might just think what you're thinking is, he's a football player, and I want him on my team. I'm going to ask Brian about Oregon's NIL situation because it has been a frequent subject of conversation lately, and apparently we're also going to talk about Nebraska. So stick around for all of that Big Ten talk. All right, I want to start with Nebraska because that's a Big Ten competitor for Oregon now. I like Matt Rule. I like their defensive staff. Dylan Raiola is going to start as a true freshman. That's going to be difficult, but he cannot be worse than what they had at the quarterback position last year. Did you watch them play quarterback last year?
Let me give you a real fair warning. As somebody who's been around guys that have coached quarterbacks and had private conversations with them about young quarterbacks, multiple guys, including guys like Urban Meyer, trust me, freshman quarterbacks in that league, you could have a 5-pick game.
Okay, but here's where I'm coming from. Last year, over the course of the entire season, Nebraska did not have a receiver eclipse 400 yards. They didn't have a pass catcher that had a 400-yard season. I don't even remember if the guy hit 300 yards. Alec Aomanor went off against Colorado in Boulder on a Friday night last year and had 295 on his own. Nebraska's leading receiver had around like 300 yards last year. They threw for about 110 yards a game as a team. I think going forward, I think Matt Rule is a good coach. The college evidence is that he knows how to coach. I think Raiola is very talented. Nebraska's not a Big Ten title contender this year. But by the time they get on Oregon's schedule, I don't remember if they're in 25, but eventually they will be. By the time Oregon plays Nebraska, I can see them starting to become a player in the Big Ten. I don't know if they get to a Tier 1 status, but could I see them being a Penn State where they're a perennial 9 to 10 win team? Yes, I absolutely can.
Before I give my retort, just for the entertainment value here, you can't make this up. Without looking it up, how many wide receivers last year for Nebraska were in double digits in catches?
3.
One
2.
with the tight end.
2. Yeah, that's for the season. That's
pathetic.
That is yes. That's what I'm saying. That's
the problem, though. You have to have guys to throw to.
Right.
They can't get the players they need outside the numbers.
I cannot imagine, even in a rebuilding Nebraska, their receivers were so bad they had 2 guys with double-digit catches. They couldn't. They were like
unfathomable.
You know what they were like? they were like the longest yards offense. They were the Mean Machines offense before Deacon Moss showed up. They're throwing the ball to Brucey. Hit me, I'm open. Hits off his face mask, pops in the air, pick six the other way. That was Nebraska's passing offense in a nutshell last year. It has to be a little bit better than that. That's why I think they could be all right. But yeah, that's Oregon. Imagine that sentence in 2010. Yeah, Oregon's Big Ten foe, Nebraska. You'd be like, Nebraska's in the Big 12. What are you talking about? Well, here we are.
It would be probably better for them in some ways, but they wouldn't get much money.
No arguments here. No arguments here.
The problem is the money. Fair or not, and
yep.
There's no such thing as fair in sports, especially college. The money is going to be higher in the SEC and the Big Ten. That's the only two leagues the people that matter, that make the decisions in Nebraska or elsewhere, are going to look at.
Yeah, so that's a perfect transition into our final topic for today's show. I've gotten a lot of questions or just interacted with Oregon fans talking about this sort of stuff. And Oregon's NIL situation has been strong. From the moment NIL was legalized, they were ready for it, and they've adapted, and they put money into it, and it's well run, and it gets kids money and all that. There have been no bad stories about it that I am aware of, and all that sort of stuff. You cover recruiting. What is the perception of Oregon's NIL collective? Because I've heard a variety of things, that they're a tier 1 school. Well, I'll share something that I heard the other day in a bit. But your perception and the national perception of Oregon as an NIL recruiting school is what?
From the media's perspective, is they're trying to buy a roster. There's no way around it. They're trying to get kids they wouldn't otherwise get. And to be honest, a lot of them they probably wouldn't. But there's still something else. I asked Aiden Breland last year at the Under Armour game. We had a media day to kick it off a few days before the game and practices. And he said they really didn't bring it up all that much until towards the end. They wanted to recruit him first. Then I asked the kid that flipped from Ohio State, the receiver. He gave in a separate interview, I put down the phone and just talking to him, wasn't recording. He more or less regurgitated that and said that like Ohio State had offered him more. So it depends on the kid, and every single one is different. You can't make a lump sum conversation. Like, that's the thing. There's probably a kid, and I don't know which one it is. Dan probably has a couple of kids for whatever reason, need, position, whatever, that he offers more to. Okay. Well, that's called logic. You know, NFL draft works that way. Free agency works. College football is really going in that same manner, but it still always comes down to the word relationships. They wouldn't have got to the conversation if it wasn't for their ability to recruit. And that's where Oregon staff gets shortchanged. I don't like how NIL works and Oregon trying to do all this, but they're not alone. Like A&M is the worst for what they did when a certain coach who's now fired was there a few years ago.
He got fired for $75 million.
Yeah, well, he still got fired because he sucked. But
Jimbo Fisher taking haymakers here on Locked On Ducks today.
He was terrible. So anyway, to make this clear, Oregon does a great job getting kids on campus. They're very consistent. Their uniforms and all that's important. And yes, Phil Knight is a part of it. If it wasn't for Phil Knight, we probably wouldn't have this podcast because they wouldn't be a relevant program. He's changed the dynamic as much as any booster in the history of college athletics.
Well, I think whether or not Phil was there, Chip Kelly was making Oregon attractive. And then Phil, I think
interested to even go there because of Phil. Because Phil became way before. You see what I'm saying? It's the money.
Yeah. I'm not denying it plays a big factor. If Chip Kelly goes to Oregon though, and just has that run, like part of that whole entrance for Oregon onto the national stage was they've got great facilities and they've got cool uniforms that nobody else is. Speaking of cool uniforms, did you see what they came up with earlier today?
I haven't watched it.
The mean green uniforms, chef's kiss. It is another just dynamite Oregon combo there. But I think it was a confluence of factors, and yes, Phil Knight is 100% a part of it. But what I've talked about recently on the show is, there's a number that was thrown around, I forget by who, that Ohio State spent $20 million in NIL on this year's roster. And I spoke to someone who's behind the scenes, but really, really connected in the world of college football the other day here at SEC Media Days, and he told me, Oregon is a Tier 1 NIL school. There's no doubt about it. They're not alone in that tier.
Exactly.
It's not like they're the only school that is putting 20+ million in NIL into their roster. There are 10, like you can't get exact numbers because none of this stuff is, public records or whatnot. It's word of mouth estimations, all that sort of stuff. But all the big time programs, yeah, even if Oregon's outspending a couple of them, like, Kirby Smart made the jab a little bit. He was like kind of being playful, kind of not. Like, I'd love to get some of that NIL money he's got up there at Oregon. What do you think Kirby Smart's NIL collective has in its coffers? That guy's won 2 national championships. You think anybody thinks to themselves, oh, I'd like to go donate? I think that could be worthwhile because he's proven that he can do it. Like, there are several other schools that spend in the same range that Oregon does.
Some of those schools still we just give bags of money and don't call it NIL. Georgia's one of them. So I don't really care what anybody says about money anymore. The NCAA doesn't investigate anything. It doesn't matter what you call it. Who cares? It still comes down to relationships. Kirby's an elite recruiter. If he wasn't, the kids even in his backyard would flip him the bird and go somewhere else. Kids want to go somewhere they are wanted. It is about time. It is about screwing over your own family and going and recruiting a kid. You look at their divorce rate for college coaches. It's insane. There's a reason. If you stay in the business, your wife's probably not happy with you.
Tom Brady comes to mind.
No comment on that.
I mean, look, as Kevin Hart aptly put in the roast, Tom, if you got to choose between your wife and kids or the chance to go 8-9, you got to do it, man. You got to do it. But last thing, is there anything to the budgets that schools are allotting? Because there's an NIL collective that's adjacent to a school, but then there's money that's going to go to pay the players. Are there any caps on that second category that's kind of going through the athletic department to give kids a consistent amount kind of across for all athletes?
Depends on the school. I won't go into specifics, but there's one school I know that as of now, and it's about to change, each freshman gets $40K. The elite kid, the kicker, whatever, and then there's other things they get once they're there. But like your base is 40. I'm guessing that most schools have a number, whatever it is. And if you're a 5-star recruit, I'm sure there's other incentives. So it just depends. But I don't think there's anything mandated by the NCAA. Number one, again, they're worthless, or anything else. It's each school. So it's so wild. And then you have private schools like Southern Cal, Stanford, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt. You would never be able to get that data anyway. You get into a legal thing. So you've heard people talk about, oh, we're going to have a cap on all this.
I think I can tell you what Stanford's NIL collective is worth. It's
12 cents because they don't want to spend the money.
I don't know if it's that high.
That's one of the richest schools in the world. They just don't care about football.
Yep. But if they did,
oh, they'd be unbelievable. They just don't care.
Yep. They just have a specific brand of player that they're going for. But you know what? They're just upholding the traditional values of the ACC, the league that they're now a part of. Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Brian, appreciate it as always.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend. And go Ducks.